I refused to let my child share a room with their step-sibling. My boyfriend Dan completely lost it when I said no, and that's when I knew something was seriously wrong. Dan moved in with me and my 10-year-old son about 8 months ago. He has a daughter who's 11 and stays with us every other week. The kids get along fine, but they each have their own rooms in my 3-bedroom house. I thought that was normal. Then one night, Dan brought it up while we were doing dishes. He said we should have the kids share a room so he could turn the spare into a home office. I stopped wiping the counter and asked him why he needed a whole room when he works from the kitchen table just fine. He said his back was hurting from the cheap chair and he needed a proper desk setup. Something about how quickly he had the answer ready felt rehearsed. I suggested putting a desk in our bedroom or rearranging the living room. He shut that down immediately. Said our bedroom was too small and he needed privacy for client calls. Said the living room wouldn't be professional. I dropped it because I was tired. He brought it up again 2 days later. And then the next week, each time more insistent. Started saying I wasn't willing to compromise, that I was choosing my son over him, that he felt like an outsider in my house. I reminded him it literally is my house that I bought before we met. He went quiet and scrolled his phone the rest of the night. My son finally had his own space after years of us living in a cramped apartment where his bed was in the living room. I wasn't taking that away because Dan suddenly needed an office after 8 months. 3 weeks later, I had to leave work early because the inventory system crashed. I texted Dan, but he didn't respond. His car was in the driveway when I got home. I walked in and heard voices upstairs. Not the kids, they were at school. The voices stopped when I hit the creaky step. The spare bedroom door was closed. I opened it without knocking. Dan was in there with a woman I'd never seen before. They were sitting close on the floor with their backs against the wall. There was a blanket spread out, 2 coffee mugs, his laptop playing music. Dan stood up so fast he knocked over one of the mugs. Started saying she was a coworker. They were working on a project. He didn't hear me come in. I asked her name. She said Whitney. I asked how long they'd been meeting here. She looked at Dan. He told her she didn't have to answer. I asked Whitney directly how many times she'd been in my house. She said maybe 4 or 5 times, always during the day when I was at work. Dan jumped in saying it wasn't what I thought, that they were just friends, that he needed someone to talk to because I'd been so difficult about the office situation. That's when it clicked. He didn't want a home office. He wanted a private room to bring Whitney over while I was working and the kids were at school. He wanted my son to give up his bedroom so Dan could cheat more comfortably in my own house. I told Whitney to leave. She grabbed her jacket and practically ran down the stairs without even putting her shoes on. I told Dan he had until I got back from picking up my son to get his stuff out. He said I was overreacting. Said if I'd just been reasonable about the office space, he wouldn't have needed to go behind my back. Like this was my fault. I left and sat in my car at the grocery store parking lot for 20 minutes before getting my son. When we got home, Dan's car was gone, but half his stuff was still there. He texted saying he'd come back tomorrow. I texted back that whatever he didn't get tonight was going on the curb. He showed up an hour later with his brother. My son was in his room with headphones on. Dan tried to talk while he packed. Said we could work through this, that Whitney was just a friend. I sat on the couch and didn't say anything. His brother kept telling him to hurry up. Dan tried to take the coffee maker saying he bought it. I told him to leave it or I was calling the cops. His brother grabbed his arm and said it wasn't worth it. They left with 3 garbage bags of clothes. My son came out and asked where Dan was. I told him Dan didn't live here anymore. He asked if that meant he got to keep his room. I said yes. He said good because his friend had to share with his little brother and it sounded terrible. Dan's ex-wife called a few days later. Said their daughter told her what happened and she wanted to apologize. Said he'd pulled similar stuff during their marriage, always needed his own space, always had reasons that sounded good until you really thought about them. The whole thing from when he first mentioned the room to when he moved out was about a month.